A middle school teacher is in legal jeopardy after police say she engaged in a sexual relationship with a former student despite him being a legal adult. Erika Mattson was arrested after investigators say they uncovered damning evidence, including shirtless photos and intimate messages allegedly exchanged with the 18-year-old. I'm going to break down the details of this case and why this is a crime with renowned predator catcher Chris Hansen. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A middle school teacher's alleged secret double life has been exposed in a scandal that honestly reads more like a forbidden romance novel than a school disciplinary file, to be honest with you. Erika Mattson, a 36-year-old middle school teacher, now faces felony charges after police say she crossed what is essentially an unforgivable line. Straight from the affidavit, it reads that she, quote, did engage in a romantic and sexual relationship with the victim, a student of the school. So yeah, we have another one here on Sidebar, another allegation of a teacher acting badly. And what makes this one disturbing and concerning is that authorities claim this was born out of a very vulnerable moment. So according to the explosive arrest affidavit that was obtained by Law&Crime, this alleged illicit affair began in May of 2023. When the then 18-year-old student, we'll talk about his age in a minute, the 18-year-old student found Mattson apparently crying alone in her classroom at Kaleidoscope School of Discovery in Panama City, Florida, and then approached her. And what started out as this innocent check-in quickly escalated into something else, because according to the affidavit, he, the victim, advised that the two began messaging on Facebook and flirting. But then text messages, police say, soon turned into secret rendezvous when the two agreed to meet up outside of school for the first time, and that turned physical quite quickly. And just as an aside to this, Mattson was this student's teacher when he was in middle school, and even though he was in high school when this apparently all went down, the two schools are located in the same building, so they would have still seen each other and possibly have had contact inside that building. The principal also told investigators that the alleged victim would have had the authority to report Mattson over this conduct, which makes you wonder why the student would have waited this long to raise the alarm. And we're going to get into that a little bit later too. But police say these digital exchanges soon led to an in-person meeting at a local movie theater. Two never made it inside, apparently. According to the affidavit, the victim and the defendant planned to go on a date at the VIP PC Cinemas. He, the victim, advised that they stayed in the truck and talked and made out the entire time. All right, before we get into this, I want to bring on a special guest, friend of the show, friend of mine, renowned predator catcher, host of Takedown on True Blue, and also host of Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen. Chris Hansen.
Jesse, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Always.
Interesting case, different case, right?
It is an interesting case because on the one hand, you've got a teacher preying on a student, no question.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. That's abusing a position of authority. But the young man, the victim in this case, is 18. So if they didn't know each other, or the young man was not her student, this is not against the law. But in Florida, where this occurred, it is illegal to abuse a position of power, and that's what's being alleged here.
Do you think that's the right law to have?
I think it is, because, there's a big difference between 18 and however old the teacher is, a grown woman who's at least 5 years older, right? Yeah. And so psychologically, to put this child in a position, this young man in a position where he is vulnerable, obviously, and especially to take advantage of a young man who is sensitive enough to go to the teacher's side because she was distraught. And for her to take advantage of this and then lure him into allegedly a sexual encounter, it's wrong, and it should be illegal for a teacher to do.
Because it's that position of a power.
It's that position of power. We're not talking about a grad student who's 25 and a grad instructor who's 35. That's a different story. When we get younger in age, especially in middle school, high school, those children still need to be protected, I would argue.
Now, I wonder if the counter argument was, I was in a vulnerable position. I was crying and he comforted me.
And he took advantage of me as a young adult. And that will likely be a defense here, as I'm sure you've thought about before. This is not an easy case to get a conviction on. And I'm shocked, quite honestly, at this point, because we usually see these cases where it's a little bit of a gray area situation. We see a lot of plea agreements in these cases, as you know. I imagine the rub would be, does she get to teach anymore? Does she have to register as a sex offender? What the sentence would be? But this is not criminal sexual conduct. This is, again, abusing a position of power.
You talk about maybe an uphill case. Having said that, the digital evidence, right?
Sure.
Messaging,
The evidence is
flirting on
strong.
Facebook, like that happens so many times in these cases, the digital trail, right?
Well, in our predator investigations, it's very dramatic when the man shows up. We just finished a sting in Louisiana. 9 guys showed up in 3 days, and you'll see that soon on True Blue. But as dramatic as that is, when I confront them, when we see the commission of a felony take place before the camera, it's the text, it's the digital evidence that is the backbone of those cases. And the same is true on the cases we talk about here.
What do you advise parents about? Oh, let me ask you this. What are the red flags parents should be looking for? Because you can't tell your children not to have social media or not have a phone. So what do you do?
Well, I think, look, it comes down to a child knowing they can come to a parent and have an open discussion without being judged or criticized or I told you so type situation, because we see this in the sextortion cases. We've got a big documentary at True Blue going on that topic. And these kids are afraid to tell their parents that they screwed up, and they're afraid to face the consequences and the embarrassment of their actions. When in reality, had the kid gone to the parent and said, look, I got in over my head here, and this is starting to become something. Help me out of it. It probably would be a much healthier situation for everybody involved. And so it's a challenge for parents, because you want to. He's 18, he's in high school. You want him to get a job. You want him to have some independence. You want him to have a social life, a girlfriend or a significant other. But you don't want him dating the teacher.
Yeah, that's.
And I'm not pretending that this happens every day, but we have seen an explosion.
It happens every day here on Sidebar.
I mean, we're commissioning a whole documentary on it. It happens so frequently.
Yeah.
And I can't explain it. I have theories, but I can't explain why over the last 2 years we have seen an explosion of female teachers accused of inappropriate relationships with students.
Can I get a preview what you think one of your theories might be?
Well, I think, as always, reporting.
Yeah.
I think the fact that there was digital evidence, 2. And 3, I don't know. I think there's been, I suppose, an explosion in fantasy porn where the teacher-student thing plays out, the daddy-daughter thing plays out, all that stuff that's on these various porn sites. Not traditional, adult porn, but fantasy stuff. And I think that leaks into the real world. And I think you see people start to act out upon that.
Very concerning situation, like most of the stories that we cover here on Sidebar. And in a different vein, a very different vein, you know what else is very concerning? We're at a point right now where we know a lot more than we did 10 years ago. And we got to be thinking, what exactly are we eating and drinking, right? I'm very particular about what I put into my body. And honestly, shopping for healthy foods is not easy. It's tough to know what's actually good for you, but that is why I'm so pumped Thrive Market is now sponsoring Sidebar. Thrive Market is a go-to online grocery store for getting healthy essentials. And one of the things I love is their shopping experience, because as a Thrive Market member, you can customize the assortment of products in just a few clicks based on your preferences and your diet. You can filter the products to get exactly what you're looking for. Like instead of chomping on candy, I found these amazing organic avocado oil chips. Also, this brand's super eco-conscious. All their products are shipped from their zero-waste warehouses. Everything delivered straight to your door. You don't even have to leave the house. So if you're ready to make healthy food shopping as easy as a few clicks, check out Thrive Market. Scan the QR code on screen, click the link in the description, or head over to thrivemarket.com/sidebar to get 30% off of your first order and a free gift when you join Thrive Market today. I haven't even gotten into the next stage of what happened here, but before we do, just real quick, if there is a delay in reporting, why do you see a delay in reporting? If we're talking about something that began in May of 2023, why are we talking about the charges now?
I think, look, he's an 18-year-old man, right? There's some part of him who is getting gratified in this relationship, as wrong as the relationship is. She's an adult woman who's obviously getting something out of it. And so for a minute at least, there's no interest in either party reporting it. And as always, somebody tells, it gets out. 18-year-old boys are not great at keeping secrets. And one thing leads to another, and suddenly people are asking, what the heck is going on here?
What are the preventive measures schools can put in place?
Well, I think it's screening, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you screen a teacher to make sure that she doesn't exploit a 12, 13, or 14, 15-year-old boy?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to come up with a way to do that. I mean, we see this across the board in our predator investigations. You know, we see sometimes people in law enforcement or people who have been in the law enforcement academy. We see Disney employees. We see people from all walks of life. You know, in the last investigation, we had a guy who drove 6 hours from Arkansas to sexually exploit a teen girl. So, you know, there are warning signs, and it's incumbent upon companies and school districts to do the very best they can to screen anybody who may have a proclivity for this activity.
You can't like monitor their conversations. You can't
No,
monitor
you
their
can't. You can't.
communications,
And I understand it's not a perfect world, and I understand there's no magic, you know, bullet for
Right.
this. Because I've seen too many different kinds of cases. I understand these guys aren't all one guy, and
Sure.
these women aren't all one woman. And who knows? Maybe for the teacher, it's a fantasy that brings her back to a very enjoyable time of life when she first had a sexual experience, and she wants to relive that with somebody in her class. I can't tell you what's in their minds.
Yeah.
But I think it's a combination of all these things and a perfect storm that we're seeing explode now with all these cases.
So let's talk about that perfect
Yeah.
storm, because I want to get back to the night where everything changed. So just days after this supposed parking lot encounter where they were making out, or allegedly making out, the student was at Mattson's home, where police say they had a sexual encounter for the very first time, and it wasn't a one-time mistake. According to the affidavit, the victim could not advise exactly how many times the two engaged in sexual activity while he was still enrolled in school, but advised it happened numerous times before he graduated. He did advise that the relationship continued after he graduated from high school. But then there was a smoking gun in this case, one that, if true, you have to think it might seal Mattson's legal fate. And before we even get into that, okay, you know, you're talking about multiple alleged sexual encounters. How does nobody notice this?
Well, I think in hindsight, people say, I suspected something. You know, what's this student doing over at a teacher's house? You know, once or twice you can look the other way, but, you know, there are always warning signs here. And it's a matter of whether or not somebody wants to take action.
The fact that taking it as true, the frequency of this happening multiple times, allegedly, and even after graduation, does that complicate the case?
Well, I think that her lawyers will argue that, you know, look, this happened at a very vulnerable time, bad judgment on the part of a teacher, but he's now graduated. The relationship continued. She deserves a pass. Bad judgment does not necessarily constitute breaking a law. The law is pretty clear, as far as I can see in Florida, that if you're a teacher, you shouldn't be having a dalliance and a sexual relationship with a child, with a student.
Yeah, and we talk about what the proof is, right? So we talked about the messages. Remember I said there was a smoking gun? What is perhaps the most damning piece of evidence? Photos. According to the affidavit, the victim also provided pictures of the defendant and him together. The pictures included shirtless photos of the victim with the defendant embracing him and kissing. No way to get past that.
No, there isn't. And you have to not only question why they would do that, but the judgment of somebody who would do that, right? And does that eliminate them from being a teacher altogether? If they've got such poor judgment to do that, well, then not only does it constitute, according to prosecutors, a crime, but it's like this person shouldn't be a teacher.
You know what fascinates me is there are people who have affairs. Two consenting adults have affairs.
Absolutely.
They keep it so secret. You would have no idea.
Right.
But in these cases, when you're talking about a crime or
No,
an
they're
alleged crime,
flaunting it.
it's
You
just-
and I talked about a case some time back in Tennessee where a sheriff deputy's wife was bringing a student to the home, the marital home, and having sex with a student. I mean, how do you think you're going to get away with that?
Yeah.
You know, people get so drawn up in the moment, I think, and so, I don't know, driven by, these fantasies that develop, that they don't see the line between fantasy and reality, and they cross it, and that becomes a felony.
And that's what's happening here, right? So on April 10th of this year, just a few days ago, Panama City Police, they arrested Mattson on a felony charge of, as we've been talking about, an authority figure engaging in sexual conduct with a student. And again, even though this is a case where the alleged victim was 18, this statute prohibits any authority figure from engaging in this type of conduct with a student. The affidavit reads, despite the victim being 18 years of age, the defendant did violate the statute due to her being an authority figure at the school the victim was enrolled in. Pursuant to Florida Statute 800.101, an authority figure shall not solicit or engage in sexual conduct, a relationship of romantic nature, or lewd conduct with a student. Statutes define an authority figure as a person 18 years of age or older who is employed by a school, and defines a student as a person who is enrolled in the school. And court records indicate that she was booked into the Bay County Jail, posted a $25,000 bond. But actually, get this, her record also indicates she's representing herself, which raises a whole lot of questions about her legal strategy, because she's preparing for an arraignment in May. What do you make of that?
Well, somebody who hasn't thought it through, obviously. I mean, if she was financially unable to have a defense lawyer, the court would appoint one for her, as you know, obviously. But to think that she can argue her way out of it, again, it raises a lot of questions about whether or not this person has the character and judgment to be a teacher in the first place. And I think, based upon what I know about, the state of Florida and the state attorneys there, they're going to want to make an example here. This is a law that doesn't get prosecuted very often, thankfully. Hopefully that's because it doesn't happen very often, but they're going to make an issue out of this one, and they'll push.
And especially because you read the headline, 18-year-old, why is this a crime?
Well, no, it happens in all these cases, Jesse, and you know it. You hear it all the time. Oh, it's a teenage boy's fantasy. Everybody, is attracted to the good-looking female teacher. And be that as it may, it's still a crime.
Yeah.
And it still takes its toll on the underage victim.
It is interesting, though, that she's facing this charge, and as far as I know, it seems to be one charge. I didn't see multiple counts of it.
Saw the one.
Does that signal to you? I mean, if this is multiple encounters, I don't know the charging specifics here, if they can group it all into one charge, but if they could charge her separately for each alleged incident, the fact that it was one charge, does that tell you anything about this?
Well, I think it tells you that they have a very strong case with one charge, and to overcharge her by, accusing her of abuse of authority for each time that there was a sexual encounter, you could see that maybe as being viewed as overcharging.
Yeah, and they might be able to bring evidence in of those other encounters.
Whereas if you charge with one count, you've got all this evidence, and if somebody says something about one or two of the incidents, you've still got a pretty good stack of evidence there.
And if there's no deal put in place, you have to imagine this young man will have to testify.
Oh yeah,
and that's not easy at times.
No, and even if you are 18, I mean, it's still a situation where he was taken advantage of in some ways by somebody who had authority over him.
By the way, so she made her first court appearance on April 11th. There was a no contact order that was issued, so it prevents her from communicating or having any sort of physical contact with the alleged victim here, as well as being within 500 feet of him. Do you see those violated a lot?
Once these cases get to the prosecution point, anybody who violates that is just begging for a judge to throw them in prison. I have seen it happen under the guise of, I can't live without you, and all the other things that go along with these sorts of cases. But generally, if they're getting proper counsel, they will stay 100 miles away.
Because if they don't, they'll get in a lot of trouble. Yeah. By the way, we can assume that the school that Mattson was teaching at, Kaleidoscope School, probably reeling from these allegations, but the organization, as far as we can see at the time of this broadcast, remaining kind of tight-lipped about the current status of her employment, and they've not yet released a statement regarding Mattson's arrest. Again, she's due back in court on May 15th for an arraignment, and under Florida law, if she's convicted, it's our understanding this is defined as a second-degree felony, and second-degree felonies can be punishable up to 15 years in prison. So Let me ask you this. The fact that we haven't heard, at the time of this recording, so much from the school, you think they're doing their own internal investigation, trying to understand what's happening?
I would have to believe they are doing their own internal investigation on two different levels. One, has she done this before with other students? Two, are we making sure we're hiring the right kinds of teachers at this school, right? The fact that they haven't made a public statement to me is a bit surprising, because anybody who's being advised properly will get out in front of this and say, you know, we obviously don't condone this. We're launching a full investigation. We want our parents and our students to have confidence in the integrity of our employees, and we will make sure that if anything else has happened, we will take action, we will report it to authorities, and we will let parents and the school body know.
In your experience, and I'll end on this point, whether she takes a deal or whether she's convicted, do you feel like prison time has to be a condition here? That you said, setting an example, you think it's important that she serves prison time?
I think if she were to get counseling, registration, and some minimal time in the county jail, this is probably a person, and I haven't studied the case.
Sure.
I haven't seen the pre-sentence investigation or anything like that. But it would seem like this would be a case that would be eligible for some minor county jail time, definite registration as a sex offender, and intensive therapy and counseling and monitoring so it doesn't happen again. And she's never going to work in a school again. She can't.
Chris Hansen,
Jesse.
Host of Takedown on True Blue. Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen. So good seeing you. Thanks so much for taking the time. Great seeing you. All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.